This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so once again, we are continuing with kashrut, and we started to deal with the um, the basic parameters, so that we have an idea of the common questions that come up and what is a question and what's not a question. Okay. And we mentioned the concept that the only way that something will be transferred from one food to another or from one vessel to another, the only way that that is done is how? You have to have the medium of heat. If there's heat, then there can be that transferal. If there's no heat, there's no transferal. We gave an exception last week. When else could it be transferal in the absence of heat?
Sharp foods is how you described it?
Good. The combination of two other factors, sharp food and duchka de sakina, and the pressure of the knife. Okay? Now, there actually is two other ways that things can be transferred, even in the absence of heat. One of them is through it being a very salty. If it's a very salty mixture, then it has the ability. We know that what does salt do, right? One of the steps in making meat kosher or fowl, any meat, is to salt it. What does salt do?
It preserves it.
Right? It preserves it, but it takes out, it draws out what is inside of it. Right? One of my more recent food that I enjoy is just a baked eggplant, and then put other things on top of it, some tahina, other things on top of it. That's become a recent favorite of mine. But my son in Israel showed Natalie that instead of just baking it, if you make these slits and then put in kosher salt, right? Kosher salt, I mean the very coarse, thick salt. It's referred to as kosher salt, right? That is the store name for it, right? So then that helps to draw out a lot of the any bitterness, and also a lot of the liquid. It makes it a much fleshier substance. Salt draws out that which is inside of it, and therefore, if something is salty, there too it can draw out and can create a I don't know, contamination, but an infusion, we'll say, of one thing into another. Another thing is pickling, meaning if something sits in a liquid for 24 hours, it then has the ability to permeate. Okay? So, for example, we mentioned yesterday, right, that someone accidentally took a meat soup bowl and filled it up with cereal and milk and had a nice breakfast. Using a dairy spoon, and had milk and a meat soup bowl and filled it up with milk and cereal. So what's the status of the cereal? What's the status of the spoon? What's the status of the bowl?
Since it's cold, there's no issues.
If it's cold, it's no issues. The cereal can be eaten along with the milk. The bowl should be rinsed, probably in the bathroom sink, so you don't get confused meat dairy. The spoon is really fine, right? The spoon could even be washed in the dairy sink. That's not an issue. Everything is good to go. But let's say, right, one of the kids decided, I don't want to finish it now. I'm going to finish it tomorrow. And they put it into the refrigerator filled with milk, right? And it sits there for 24 hours. Now what do we have? We have a problem. Problem with what? Okay, so So the question is, do we have a problem with the soup bowl or do we have a problem with the milk? Okay, the soup bowl, we will have a problem because even though there was no heat to serve as the medium of infusion, but 24 hours will cause, right, that pickles it, so to speak, that will make it infused. So the soup bowl, we've got a problem. How about the milk?
Would it still be considered like a drawn out effect? So it would, if it
Okay.
affects the bowl, it would have to affect the liquid.
Well, what question should we ask regarding the bowl? When it was first used, what question do we want to ask?
When it was first used,
When was it last used with meat?
When was it last used with meat? Heat, right?
Yes.
With
Heat,
hot meat,
heated meat.
with heat meat, right? Was it last used? So if it was not used for 24 hours from, we'll say, from the starting point, so then even though 24 hours later the milk has gone into the bowl and the bowl is a problem, and we'll deal with it with what we do with the bowl in such a case in a few moments. The bowl is a problem, but the milk would be okay as long as it had not been used, because anything. So let's say, it's an infusion. After 24 hours, there's an infusion. Okay, let's say I put hot cereal with milk into that meat bowl. And let's say instead of putting cold cereal into my cold cereal and milk, I put hot cereal with milk into my meat bowl. Then what's the status of the food? What's the status of the bowl? What's the status of the food? You have to ask. What's the status of the food? There's a question. You're too machmir. You're too strict over here. Right? They're not going to hire you as a rabbi. They want leniencies. Right? What's going to happen? What's the question you need to ask? You put hot dairy soup, hot dairy cereal into your meat bowl. So the meat bowl has certainly been compromised because it's a meat bowl and now dairy has been infused into it. The meat bowl is now not kosher. What to do with it? We'll deal with that soon. How about the cereal?
No.
The cereal's compromised too.
Determined. No, not the amount. Before we even get to the amount. Esther, you said it before.
It's compromised. The cereal has been compromised if it's hot.
So
Right?
the cereal's been hot. The cereal's hot. So it's going to draw out. It's going to
The
go
meat.
into the bowl. It's going to draw out from the bowl. Great. But, Mary, what did you say a moment ago? Yes, how long has it been since hot meat was used in that bowl? Because if it's more than 24 hours, then anything it draws out does not have any potency to it. Okay? Let's not forget that. The term is ben yomo, within the day, within the 24 hours. That is one of the first things that we need to find out when it comes to the food. When it comes to the bowl, even though it hasn't been used for 24 hours, there is meat in there. Now there's dairy in there, and it has been compromised. It has been treifed, as we say, right? It is now no longer kosher. But the food in the bowl, even when there has been a transfer, we have to ask, has there been a transfer of anything of any potency to it or not? And if it has not been used for hot in 24 hours, there is no potency. So once again, the mediums of transfer are heat, sharp food in conjunction with a pressure of a knife, heavily salted, and if it is pickled, so to speak, if it sat there for 24 hours. Now, It's only if a liquid's been in there for 24 hours. And liquid means something pourable. Okay? Therefore, mayonnaise is not considered a liquid. Ketchup is not considered a liquid. We're doing something that pours as a liquid pours. Okay. So those are mainly heat. Also, that's when it comes up most often. Also, the pressure of the knife plus the sharpness of a food, or the onion, the garlic. Less often, but also you've got the 24 hours that it's sitting in there, that it becomes pickled, so to speak, and then also very salty. But the second factor we discussed last time was Eino Ben Yomo. If has not been used within 24 hours, then we are good to go, right? And we mentioned you're going to family, you're going to friends, right? You're going to family, and they're trying their best, but this is so foreign to them, right? And you've got your kosher pot sitting there on the stove with your kosher soup, and someone goes by and notices, oh, it needs a good stir. And with the beautiful intent of wanting to only help their wonderful family members who have gone crazy and decide to become Jewish, but with only the best of intent, right? Right? They've lost their minds, but they shouldn't have to have soup that's not stirred. So they reach in and they take out this spoon from there. They used it. That's what they used to stir their pork rinds every Sunday morning, right? And they take that pork rind designated spoon and stir your soup with it. What's the status of the soup? What do we need to look at? When was it last used for the pork rinds? If it was not used within 24 hours, enjoy your soup. And ask them to please be more careful next time. But enjoy your soup. If it has been used within 24 hours, all is not yet lost. Because another concept we discussed last week was the concept of batel b'shishim, being nullified when there is 60 times the mass of whatever fell inside or was inserted inside. So if it's a little pot and it's a big spoon, then we got a problem. If it's a big pot, and if you do displacement of water of that spoon, the entire spoon, even though it's not pure pork rind, but we have to treat it as such. So if you displace it in water, so that is 3 ounces, and you've got yourself 180 plus ounces of soup in that pot, then also you can enjoy the soup. Okay? So those were the concepts that we touched upon last time. Okay. Another concept, just to be familiar with, is, which kind of not confuses, but combines a lot of these points, is something that's called not bar not. Okay? And that's an abbreviation standing nuntet is notain tam. It has infused taste. Bar, the son of infused taste. Meaning, if we have infused taste, and then we have that rebound, that which was infused is now infusing elsewhere. If everything is allowed, then we can be lenient with that. We're not so lenient, but in certain cases, we're very lenient. For example, I cooked some vegetables in a meat pan that had been used within 24 hours. Okay. What's the status of those vegetables?
Inflation.
They're meaty, they're fleshig. Okay? Now, keep in mind, if it was a clean pot that had to be used in the 24 hours, they are meaty, meaning I should not melt cheese on top of it. It does not mean, let's take a more common example. This comes up often. I'm making pasta. Sometimes I like to add cheese to my pasta. Sometimes I like to add a nice meat sauce to my pasta. I made the pasta in a meat pot that had been used within 24 hours. Okay? That pasta is now meaty. That does not mean that if I eat that pasta, I need to wait 6 hours before I have any dairy. I haven't eaten meat. I've eaten something parava that was infused with this beliot, whatever had been infused into the pot, that had now gone into there. Okay? Now, there is an opinion that would say, 1 second though, Rabbi, hey, the meat went into the pot. Was that allowed? It was a meat pot. So I cooked my meat in there. The meat went into the pot. That is first generation infusion. Now what's happening? It's coming out from the pot if it's coming out from the pot into something dairy, we've got a problem because that second infusion was not a permitted infusion, but it went out from the pot into the noodles. So there is an opinion, I believe among Sephardim, they'll say, you can have those noodles with cheese. Why? Because you have not one infusion, bar not, then that which was infused is coming out again, and it's all dehatera, it's all mutar. Meat went into a meat pot, that's fine. It then went from there into parava noodles, it's fine. We, B'nai Ashkenaz at least, not everyone, I'm not sure about the Sephardim, right? But we would not use that with cheese. Okay? We would not use that with cheese. And that's why many families will have just a few parava pots. And that way, I could cook my vegetables in there. I could cook my noodles in there and then take it out and mix it with cheese and take others out and mix it with meat. It's all fine. It's perfectly powerful. But let's say now I need to fry up a lot of eggplant. I'm making a major eggplant parmesan. And I have one dairy frying pan. I have one parava frying pan, but I've got a couple of meat frying pans. Can I use those meat frying pans to fry up my parava eggplant to then bake it with cheese, mix it all with cheese? So even though it's not barnat dehetera, even though the meat went into the frying pan, that was allowed. The frying pan then, so to speak, went into the eggplant. That's allowed. But we don't treat it as if it becomes negated. But if there is one other factor that we include, then if the meat pan is Eino Ben Yomo, what's Eino Ben Yomo? Has not been used for 24 hours. So now we've got a combination of Eino Ben Yomo and not Barnat Dehetera. So in such a case, if you want to fry up a lot of eggplant, ideally, of course, you should use your dairy frying pan since you're going to mix it in with cheese and bake it, right? Ideally, use your dairy frying pan and or use your parava, right, frying pans. However, if you don't have enough and you need to use a meat frying pan, then you can, as long as it has not been yomo, it has not been used for 24 hours. Okay? So that's the concept known as not barnat and Eino ben Yomo. Okay, let's get practical now. What do you do in terms of sinks? Why might sink, right? If I'm just using one sink, why might that be a problem? Hot water, right? So I'm using hot water and I'm washing dairy stuff in there. So my sink is becoming dairy. Soon after, I'm using hot water and I'm washing meat stuff in there, right? So my sink is becoming treif, okay? And I'm afraid that which it absorbed is now going to go out and enter into my other. So how do we navigate sinks in a kosher kitchen?
Are you supposed to have two?
Okay, if you have two sinks, then you're gold, right? And many of the apartments, yours comes with two sinks.
It comes with a double sink,
Yeah,
but they're
it's a
attached
divided,
together.
it's a divided, right?
Okay, even that,
Two sinks.
You could designate.
yes, yes, okay. If one only has one sink, so what we do is we buy a little drain, a little rack that sits on the bottom. And you have one for dairy and one for meat. What does that do? What is that accomplishing?
Is it lifting
Make
it
sure
away
that,
from
Go on,
the sink?
Ladero.
no, I'm just saying to just make sure that your sink, it just make sure that everything is separated.
Okay, there isn't contact between the non-kosher sink and the utensils and the dishes, whatever is in there. So that is what we do. Okay? Can we kosher a sink?
Yes.
It will depend on what? The material. Which brings us back to our breakfast bowl that we put hot cereal into it, and it was a meat bowl. Which things can be koshered? Metal, and yeah, we can say glass. Okay. Which things cannot be koshered?
Ceramic.
Yeah. So that cereal bowl, there's nothing you can do with that cereal bowl. And if you have yourself a ceramic sink, right, and it's not a brand new sink, but you moved into the apartment or moved into the house from someone else, there's nothing you can do. That is a non-kosher sink.
Rabbi,
Right? Now, if you've got two sinks, right, so then you would use a drain. Even if you don't use a drain, right, as long as you moved in and what?
You can kosher the surface.
Let's say it's ceramic, I can't kosher it.
What was the question?
Let's say I move into an apartment and there are two sinks, ceramic sinks. I have to assume it's treif, it's not kosher, right? In what situation would I say that, well, maybe you don't really need to put down a grating. You can put things directly down on the sink.
If you're just not using hot water, or
Well, if you're not using hot water, that's true. But if the sink hasn't been used for 24 hours, right? You know, you're in a dormitory. You're in a dormitory, right? And you have, non-kosher, non-Jewish, non-kosher roommates, and you've got your pot that you use for your Shabbos challah. And everyone knows, don't use Moshe's pot. That's Moshe's pot. Don't use Moshe's pot. Moshe keeps kosher. Don't use Moshe's pot. And you cook up this amazing cholent. And then Shabbos morning, you're about to bite into your cholent, and your roommate says to you, I have to confess, Wednesday, I used your pot for my bacon and eggs. I'm so sorry. What's the status of your cholent?
Hadn't been used.
The cholent's fine. The
It's
ceramic.
fine. 24 hours have passed.
24 hours has passed,
It wasn't
right?
really-
It's okay, as long as it was clean when you started using it, of course, right? So even that ceramic sink, if it hasn't been used for 24 hours, right? If you have two sinks, then you might be able to, not need to have that grate in there. If you got one sink, you're not going to start timing every time. You just have to have two different grates. They sell them very inexpensively, right? And you have one for dairy, one for meat.
And is it the same for like a drying rack? You have one of each? Or
Typically, you do.
Dave and I use our dishwasher as the drying rack. Like in that instance, we have like the top and the bottom mean different things. Or-
Okay. So let's come to a dishwasher. Mary asked about drying racks, right? So drying racks are less of an issue because it's clean and it's just water that's dripping off over there. But I would say yes, you want to have separate ones. Why? Because that goes into that really goes into that realm of how do we set things up that there's less confusion and less mistakes, right? And if you're using the same, the dairy and the meat are all going in, right? So they might even go in at the same time. Then you're going to get a dairy thing, but so you really want to have a good visual, tactile separation of your meat and your dairy. So a drying rack, right? I would say that halachically nothing is going to be compromised in terms of the kashrut by putting it into a different or the same drying rack. But nevertheless, that will lead to other crossovers. Sorry?
Potential confusion.
Yeah, other
Same thing
crossovers.
for dishwasher. Like if someone-
Okay. So how about a dishwasher? Right? What is the status of a dishwasher? Can I use the dishwasher for meat and for dairy? Must I designate it? If I moved into an apartment or a house and there was a dishwasher there, can it be kosher? Can it not be kosher? So we mentioned before that metal, glass can be kosher. And we said ceramic cannot be kosher. When it comes to plastic, so there are different opinions if it can or cannot be kosher. In general, we don't go ahead and kosher plastic. However, when it comes to a dishwasher, and realize that a dishwasher is not so compromised. Let's understand why. I might have put in some really greasy, grimy, meaty dishes in there. Okay, so what happens? I've got that arm there that shoots out drops of water. Okay? Now, halachically, we view different if there is a direct stream or if there are these intermittent drops, right? So what's going to be happening? It gets really hot in there, right? And then this hot water is smacking against the dishes and clearing off all of the grime that's on it, and then it's dripping down all around, right? So it's going to be touching, right, those racks, okay? Therefore, going forward, we need to designate, I do a lot of meat, not a lot of dairy. I do a lot of dairy, not a lot of meat. This dishwasher is going to be a meat dishwasher. And whatever I use less, that I'll wash by hand, I'll use disposable, whatever it is that a person might decide to do, right? However, the first time through, you're moving into a house, right? You're renting an apartment, and there's a dishwasher there. So there, what one can do is, it hasn't been used in 24 hours. So Rav David Feinstein's Zatzal's psak is run it 3 times at full strength, right? The most intense rinse it has with soap, empty. Run it 3 times, and that will negate anything that it might have absorbed, will have been negated. And from that point on, designate, it's my dairy dishwasher, only for dairy stuff. It's my meat dishwasher, only for meat stuff. And that's how we carry on with that. So coming back to your question, Mary, which was, if I want to just use the dishwasher as a drying rack. So again, nothing will become compromised. Not the dishwasher, not the rack, not the things going in there. Nothing will be compromised. At the same time, I would say for the confusion issue, and even we'll use the top rack for this and the bottom rack for that. Well, wait, was the top dairy and the bottom? Wait, which one was it again? I mean, I know it would drive me crazy, right? Trying to remember which one is which. I would say use the dishwasher, whatever the dishwasher is going to be. If it's going to be a meat dishwasher, use it for meat. If it's a dairy, and then get another drying rack for whatever the dishwasher is not going to be used for. That's what I would strongly recommend. Yes, Gabrielle.
So using these principles and kind of making a Pesach connection, that's why we don't use a dishwasher during Pesach, because of the chametz, and it's almost impossible to remove it.
Right. Chametz is when we go into kashrut overdrive, right? And there, even if something, right, there is no bittul. So chametz does not become nullified 60-1, right? So that's why we go a little bit, I don't want to say OCD, but we go into overdrive, let's say, right, when it comes to kashrut, because a lot of these principles that we are learning about, these leniencies of 60-1, right, they don't apply by Pesach. Okay, by Passover, they don't apply. So we're going to leave out Pesach now for a while. Okay? Now, if something was compromised, we mentioned, so we can kosher it. If it's made from metal or glass, I think we mentioned last time, the way that what's the rule when it comes to koshering something?
The way it became treif is the way that you have to kosher.
Good. The way it became treif is the way that you have to kosher it. However it went in, that's how it will be expunged. It's a great word. That's how it'll be expunged, right? So if it went in through the medium of liquid, which is the typical, so then we do hagala. It's immersed into boiling hot water, and then we are good to go, okay? If it was through direct heat, then you need to use a blowtorch to get the direct heat on it. That, we live in a pretty affluent, disposable world. So a lot of these things, the baking pans, which would not stand up to a blowtorch, right? So we replace those. Frying pans, right? If they're Teflon, unless they are these wrought iron ones, very expensive ones, those can be blowtorched. Otherwise, typically we replace them. The main koshering that we do is hagala, is immersion into boiling hot water. Okay.
Rabbi, I have a
Yes.
Rabbi, I have a question. So if you designate your dishwasher as meat, and you've done the 3 cycles, and now your dishwasher is meat, and that's all you're using it for, and then you decide, you know what? No, I'm going to become a vegetarian. I'm not going to do meat anymore. Can you then do the, run the 3 cycles empty
Well,
and
well,
redesignate your
vegetarian won't be an issue.
Okay,
It's only an issue if you want to become, if you want to,
go the
if you want to
reverse.
revert to dairy,
Right,
right?
right, right.
Becoming
So,
vegetarian. So then, if
well,
if you're washing your what's it called stuff in there, right? That's not going to. That's not well.
well,
So
I'm sorry.
there.
I mean a vegetarian who eats dairy.
Okay. So you want
So
to use it? Okay. Yeah,
an
you're correct. You didn't say vegan. You didn't say vegan.
ovo-lacto
I got to get all
vegetarian,
my new terms.
not a
Yes.
vegan, not a vegan.
Okay. Um, if it's, you know, look, one could do that. We don't do that on a consistent. We don't, this week it's dairy, and then 3 cycles. Next week it's meat, right? If it's going to be, a complete changeover, and that's what it's going to be going forward. So then we would do that, right?
Okay,
But we would not do that. This is my meat week. You know, you
right.
know. I heard if you eat all meat one week and all dairy the next week, as a Seinfeld, he goes into a grocery store. He says, "Hey, you look pretty good. What do you eat? Right? Carbs, protein. Like, what do you eat? So I'm sure there is some fad diet out there which says, all meat, nothing dairy for a week straight. The next week, all dairy. You name it. There's a diet a day that comes out. So then we would not go up and back, Esther. But if a
Right.
person is making a lifestyle change and therefore, tantamount to moving apartments, so then one would be able to use that heter of the 3 time using
Thank you, Rabbi.
it. Okay. Now, if we're talking about koshering, so a couple of things to keep in mind. Did we mention toveling yet? Okay,
No.
toveling and koshering are 2 different things that people often get confused. Toveling is immersing it in a mikvah. We have a kalim mikvah here in Beth Jacob. We have a women's mikvah for women's immersions, right? Family purity immersions, and we also have a kalim mikvah, which is for the immersion of vessels. Okay, immersing it in a mikvah does not make it kosher. If it's not kosher, immersing it in a mikvah makes it wet and still not kosher. Okay? That's all it does. Okay? Immersion in a mikvah, tovel, is a different concept. And that is that a glass, metal, or ceramic, not wood, not plastic, but we learn in the Torah itself that after a battle, when spoils were taken, so the vessels that they had then needed to either be koshered if it was not koshered, and then or immersed in a mikvah. Okay, so if I buy something new, that's not a problem of kashrut. It's new, it hasn't been used. But it needs to be immersed in a mikvah by a Jewish person in order for it then to become elevated for sanctified eating use, right? We have this concept that the altar of the temple used to bring atonement. Now it is our table that brings atonement, our meals, through the blessings that are said, through the generosity and the hosting that is done, through the kashrut that is maintained. our table becomes like an altar. And therefore, we need to elevate that which is used for direct food contact. Okay? This is not to make something that has been compromised in terms of its kashrut to make it kosher. But this is for regular usage. Okay. Now, in the mikveh, it needs to be completely enveloped by the mikveh waters all at once. Okay? So when you're putting it in, that's what we have. I don't want to show you now because we don't use the Keilah mikveh at night because that's where the woman's mikveh leads out from, and we want to maintain the privacy of any woman who's using mikveh. But basically, we have these baskets. So you put the basket in there, and then you drop it in, and then it goes through the water, and then it hits the bottom. So for that instant, whatever it was completely filled, surrounded by water. By a mikvah, when I'm doing Tvilat Kelim, it needs to all be simultaneous. When I am koshering, making something kosher, there I don't need it to be simultaneous. So if I've got this 12-inch knife and I have a 7-inch pot and I need to kosher that knife, how am I going to get that 12-inch knife into my 7-inch, right? So there what I can do is I can dip it in 7 inches, right? And now this part, 7 inches was done. Take it out, turn it over, and dip it in again 7 inches. And what has happened? This entire knife, whatever, has now been immersed. I don't need it to be simultaneous all at once. It needs to have been immersed in the boiling hot water. Why? Because the boiling hot water serves to do what? What's my favorite word? To expunge whatever might have been absorbed, right? So I don't need that to happen all at once. What do I do with a big pot? Okay, so the smaller pots, I put it into the bigger pot. But at a certain point, I'm going to have my biggest pot, right? What do I do with my biggest pot? How do I kosher that? Yoshi?
Isn't that where you fill it to the top, get it boiling, and then you toss in like a hot rock or something?
Okay,
it, right?
good.
Or maybe a regular rock. I'm not sure.
Good.
And then it kind of overflows.
Okay. So a big pot, what you would do, Yoshi said correctly, is you'd fill it up with water, bring that to a boil, and then drop in a rock, and then that's going to cause it to spill out over the sides, and we're good to go. But one second, why is that good enough? How does that really take care of the outside of the pot? So let's analyze this a little bit. What's the problem with the outside of the pot? You didn't cook on the outside of the pot.
The heat was just applied to it.
Okay, but what's the problem when it comes to the food that was in the pot? How does the food that's inside the pot compromise the outside of the pot?
With like splashes on the outside.
Okay, so one way that it compromises it is there's splashes and splatters. Okay, that's one thing. Or you might argue, no, it permeates, right? When I'm boiling stuff inside that pot, that doesn't just permeate the inside of the pot, that fully permeates the pot.
That's why you don't touch the outside of the pot.
That's why it's a good idea not to touch the outside of the pot. It is hot, right? So therefore, there are two concerns. A, the contents fully permeated to the outside of the pot, concern number one. Concern number two, Even if it didn't permeate, there is splattering. Well, we've taken care of both problems by using the Yoshi method. How's that? Well, if the contents fully permeate, so then when I boil up the hot water, what does the hot water do? Fully permeates. However it went in, is it going to come out? Whatever degree it went in, you want to say it went in completely? Well, that's how it will become expunged. That's how it will come out. Kibolo, as it was absorbed, kach polto. That's how it will be expelled. So if you want to argue, no, Rabbi, it went through to the very end, to the whole pot, well, so does my hot water then. If the issue is it didn't go through, but there's splattering over there, well, I can guarantee you when you drop that big rock into there, what's there going to be a lot of?
Splattering.
A lot of splattering. So it went in through splattering and comes out through splattering. It went in through permeation, it comes out through permeation. So that's how we handle those big pots. Okay.
Quick question.
Yes.
You said Cibolo Kach. Is it Polto or
Polto.
Polto.
Kibolo kach polto. Ki, like bolo, like it got absorbed. Kach, so too, polto. It will get expunged. All right, my friends. How about ovens? How about ovens? Well, first of all, how about stovetops?
Are we talking about how do we kosher it?
I'm talking about how does a kosher kitchen deal with stovetops? Do you have to have different stovetops for dairy and meat?
I would say no because of the heat. I don't know.
Sure.
I just know that
I don't know, Rabbi.
kosher it for Pesach.
Just one second.
And then turn it off.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I've got dairy and meat cooking on two adjacent fires at the same time, there we would be concerned of splattering from one to the other, from one into the other, from one onto the other, right? Or even for them coming in contact with one another, right? We would not want to have meat cooking away and dairy cooking away at the same time. If one can have separate stovetops for dairy and for meat, that would certainly be ideal because that would take care of the confusion, cross mixing that we want to avoid. But before we redid our kitchen about, I don't know, 5-6 years ago already. I don't know how long it was. 4, 5, 6 years ago. So we had the standard Irvine kitchen, which was 2 metal sinks, right, attached, a tile countertop, which cannot be koshered, and this little oven. We ended up buying another oven and putting it in. This is being taped. Sorry, putting it in the garage, right? Right, and use that for some extra cooking over there, right? But there was one stovetop and there was one stovetop. So why is it not an issue to have cooked dairy on a stovetop and then take that off and put meat on a stovetop? Of course, assuming that it's clean, right? We're not talking about that I had a cheese omelet and there's all this gooey cheese that's sitting there on the grate, and I'm putting my meat on top of the cheese. But assuming that it's normally clean as a stovetop normally is, right? Even if there is spillage, usually the spillage is on the grate, on the pan underneath, not where, right? Assuming that we're being careful to make sure that the grates stay clean, there's not going to be a problem, right? I mean, that's getting burned out every time, right? Whether you've got gas or you've got electric coils, right? Or you've got the new glass tops, right? That's getting really hot over there, right? There's nothing that's getting absorbed there that's then, not getting burnt out. And okay. So ideally, if you can have separate stovetops, right, for dairy and meat too, right? But very often one cannot, and then one does not need to have that. You don't want to have open pots or even dairy meat pots cooking simultaneously. But as long as you're keeping it clean, it's not going to be an issue. Yeah.
I have a question about when you're eating at the dinner table. I think this is okay. I think that's what I read, but to clarify, so if you're having a meal with your significant other, your spouse, or whoever, and you're sitting across the table, and they decide they want a slice of pizza, dairy pizza, and you're, having meatloaf or something, it's okay in that sense to eat across from each other?
Okay. So in such a case, okay, I don't know if, I'm sorry. Gabriella asked, if you're eating with someone else at a table and one person is eating meat, the other person is eating dairy, right? Is that okay, or is that something that needs to be done, right? So in such a case, at least one of you should be on a different either tablecloth or placemat, right? You want to have some visual difference, so that will serve as a reminder not to lean over and, oh, can I have one of those meatballs, right? Or let me have a bite of your pizza, whatever it might be. So you want to have different tablecloths. Now, it doesn't need to be a different tablecloth, right? It could be a placemat, right? Is a tablecloth of sorts, right? If you don't have placemats, if you're, somewhere else, you could take a paper towel, right? It doesn't need to be, extravagant, but there needs to be some different type of table covering that one has and the other one does not have. So you've got that visual difference going down over there. Okay, I think we're gonna hold off on the oven until next week, because that is much more of a big topic.
So one quick question.
Yes.
So if you were, say, staying in a hotel or like an Airbnb and they had a stove, and even if your pots were kosher, would you still have to kosher the burner?
No.
It just clean it and
No.
just make
Pesach, again,
Yes.
Pesach is Pesach.
Yeah,
But
okay, burners are fine.
but you're going to an Airbnb, right? Or you're going to a hotel and they've got a nice kitchenette area there, and you're bringing along your own frying pan, right? As long as it is, visibly clean, right? You don't need to worry about, right? The oven is a different story.
Yeah.
Okay, the oven is contained heat. The oven, right, it's not as serious as using their pot, but it's somewhere in between using their pot as opposed to the stovetop, which is fine. Yeah.
So if you're traveling, maybe this is a comment, not so much a question, but you could even topple something in a natural body of water. Is that correct or no?
You can.
Like say you're by the ocean where
The ocean for sure.
It's trickier with like lakes.
Lakes, is it a man-made lake? I myself am not proficient on those halachot. When could you not? An ocean, that's God's mikvah. That is the mother of all mikvahs. Yeah. So there you're certainly you're certainly good to go.
I do actually have one more question
Mhm.
because we have like a portable burner that has rubber as the burner pads. So it's like something you can take camping, although it plugs into.
Rubber doesn't melt when you.
No. I don't know how to describe it. It's like
Silicone?
maybe it's silicone.
might
It's
be
like
silicone.
a
Maybe.
like a bachelor pad kind of little, like little burner set. It's a double burner. And
Okay.
you can cook soup on it. You can do anything.
Okay.
It's just not an open flame. It's electrical, so it
Okay.
has these little burner pads. So is there any problem there using that? Like, doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't change.
Because remember, it's not in contact with the food,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if food does get onto it, it's getting burned up.
Doesn't
right?
matter if you bought it secondhand.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. All righty. Good. Everybody could say goodbye to all the squares over here.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you,
Thank
Rabbi.
you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good night.
Good night. Night.
Night.
Night. My hands are
Good
wet.
night.
Help me. My hands are wet.
Oh, gosh.